A seismic event has just rocked American gun law. In a unanimous 9-0 decision, the Supreme Court has upended the National Firearms Act's foundation, directly challenging nearly a century of federal firearm restrictions. The court ruled that the NFA's justification as a tax measure is no longer valid, fundamentally changing the legal landscape for millions of gun owners. In response, the Department of Justice made a stunning reversal, announcing it would comply with the ruling and abandon its long-held defense of the NFA's constitutionality. For decades, the DOJ argued the NFA's registration and taxation were constitutional. Now, with the Supreme Court's decision, that argument has collapsed. This isn't just a legal technicality. It signals a profound shift in how the federal government will approach suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and other NFA items. The case is the result of years of advocacy and litigation by gun rights groups, who have long argued that the NFA's burdensome requirements serve no public safety purpose. The Supreme Court's decision validates these arguments, setting the stage for the most significant rollback of federal gun control in modern history. While celebrated by Second Amendment advocates, the ruling also brings uncertainty as agencies and states scramble to adapt. Understanding what's changed and what comes next is now crucial for every gun owner. To understand the impact of this decision, we need to look back at the National Firearms Act of 1934. Enacted during the gangster era, the NFA targeted machine guns, short-barreled rifles and shotguns, and suppressors, items associated with organized crime. Rather than banning these outright, the law imposed a $200 tax and required federal registration, making them expensive and difficult to obtain. In 1934, $200 was a fortune, effectively putting these items out of reach for most Americans. Congress passed the NFA as a tax law to avoid constitutional challenges, a strategy upheld by the Supreme Court in Sonzinski versus United States. Suppressors, often called silencers, don't make guns silent, they reduce noise, much like a car muffler, and are encouraged for public health in many countries. The NFA's inclusion of suppressors has long been criticized as counterproductive by gun owners and hearing protection advocates. Over the decades, the NFA's requirements have changed little, but the process remains slow and cumbersome. Applicants still face months-long waits, extensive paperwork, and fingerprinting. Gun rights advocates argue the system only discourages lawful ownership of items commonly used for legal purposes. Before the Supreme Court's decision, Congress scored a major win for gun owners, repealing the $200 NFA tax stamp for suppressors, short-barreled rifles, and similar items. This move was the result of years of lobbying and grassroots activism, with gun rights advocates pushing lawmakers to address what many saw as an outdated and unfair financial barrier. The repeal is set to take effect on January 1, 2026, making suppressors and short-barreled rifles far more affordable for law-abiding citizens. However, it's important to note that the $200 tax still applies to machine guns and destructive devices, so not all NFA items are affected equally by this change. Lawmakers managed to pass the repeal by inserting a key provision into a must-pass budget bill. This strategic move allowed them to bypass significant opposition and ensured the measure's survival, even as debate raged on. The NFA's registration requirements, however, remain in place for now. For buyers, the financial barrier is gone, but the bureaucratic hurdles, ATF forms, fingerprints, background checks, and long wait times, remain. The process is still far from simple, and many first-time buyers are surprised by the paperwork and patience required. With the tax stamp gone, experts predict a surge in demand for suppressors and short-barreled rifles. This could make wait times even longer, as the ATF struggles to keep up with the influx of applications. In essence, the government removed the financial barrier, but kept the time-consuming registration system. Buyers save money but not time, and the paperwork remains a significant obstacle for many. This partial victory set the stage for the legal battle that followed, as advocates pushed for further reforms and opponents challenged the changes in court. The fight over suppressor rules was far from over. With the tax stamp repealed, gun rights groups saw their chance. Activists and legal experts quickly mobilized, seeing a rare opportunity to challenge decades-old restrictions. Across the country, rallies and meetings intensified, with supporters calling for sweeping changes to federal gun laws. Legal teams argued that without the tax, the NFA's entire registration scheme was now on shaky ground. They claimed the government no longer had a constitutional basis to require registration of suppressors and short-barreled firearms. Lawsuits were filed in federal courts nationwide, each aiming to strike down the NFA's registration requirements. News outlets covered the legal battles as judges weighed the arguments, and the stakes grew higher. The Supreme Court's unanimous 9-0 decision sent shockwaves through the legal world. The NFA's primary legal pillar was gone, and the DOJ was forced to reverse its long-standing position. Gun owners and advocates celebrated the historic win. The legal momentum was now firmly on their side, opening the door to remove suppressors and short-barreled rifles from the NFA entirely. The ultimate goal is clear. Treat these items like any other standard firearm, with no federal registration, no special tax, and no year-long wait times. For many, this marks a new era in American gun rights. The federal rollback has created a legal minefield in many states. Some states only allow NFA items if they're federally registered. If the NFA registration vanishes, gun owners in these states could suddenly find themselves in legal jeopardy. The most problematic are the danger zone states, like Alaska, Michigan, and Washington, where state law explicitly requires NFA registration. In these states, the end of federal registration could make ownership illegal overnight. Other states fall into a gray area, with vague language about federal authorization, leaving gun owners at risk of prosecution until courts clarify the law. A handful of good states simply require compliance with federal law. If federal law is silent, owners are in the clear. But even here, there's no guarantee a local prosecutor won't challenge the new status quo. This patchwork of conflicting state laws is now one of the most urgent challenges for gun owners and advocates. Resolving these contradictions will require swift legislative and legal action at the state level. The tax repeal and potential end of NFA registration are set to unleash a tidal wave of demand for suppressors and short-barreled rifles. Industry leaders predict sales could triple, but manufacturers face huge challenges ramping up production and supply chains. Severe shortages and long wait times are likely, as demand will far outstrip supply for months or even years. While the tax is gone, a spike in demand could temporarily drive up prices for the most popular models. The push for NFA reform was fueled by backlash against the ATF's attempt to regulate pistols with stabilizing braces, which galvanized gun owners nationwide. Now, the industry is preparing for explosive growth, and the logistical headaches that come with it. For consumers, legal and financial barriers may be falling, but practical ones are rising. The new era brings opportunity but also new challenges for buyers and sellers alike. The Supreme Court's decision and the tax repeal have transformed the landscape for American gun owners. But this transition is filled with uncertainty, especially in states with laws tied to the NFA. Gun rights groups are mobilizing to fix state laws and launch legal challenges where needed. If you live in a state referencing the NFA, proceed with caution. Ownership could still carry legal risk. For new buyers, patience is key. The tax is gone, but the ATF's registration system remains until courts strike it down. And supply shortages are likely. The financial barrier is gone, and the legal foundation for registration is crumbling. A monumental victory for the Second Amendment. But vigilance is essential. Follow legal developments, support advocacy groups, and stay engaged at the state level. The path to full deregulation is clear, but the final steps will require careful attention and continued advocacy.